Parents of teenagers might be surprised to learn what their kids really think about having them around. The New York Times looks into the issue in an online article called "What Do Teenagers Want? Potted Plant Parents." Psychologist Lisa Damour writes teens, quote, can give the impression that interacting with the family is an imposition. So here's a complaint one might not expect. They wish their parents were around more often. Lisa Damour is a CBS News contributor. Good morning.
Good morning.
So when I first heard the phrase potted plant, I thought negative, but you take it a different direction.
I do. What I've learned from teenagers is they like to have their parents around, but that doesn't mean they want to interact with their parents. And so I think a potted plant makes a good metaphor for that.
Yes, and so what do the studies show?
So the research actually bears out what the teenagers are asking for. What we see is that parental presence is linked to all sorts of health benefits for kids. You see lower levels of depression, you see better functioning in school, you see lower risk behaviors, you see better peer relationships. And so the data really are on the side of the teenager's preference to have the parents there. And one of the really interesting things in the data is they separate out parental presence from warmth and connectedness in the families. And even when the warmth and connectedness isn't strong, the presence in and of itself is valuable for teenagers.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What about for working parents who just can't be around as much as perhaps they would like to be?
Absolutely. So there are families with big jobs or who are spread thin, so they can't always be present in the ways they want. So the good news is that teens are resilient, kids are resilient, kids thrive under all sorts of conditions. And what we see, one of the studies that I cite in the article looked at what they call fly-in, fly-out parents in Australia. There's a large sector of parents who work away from home for 2 to 3 weeks at a time on oil rigs or mines, and they studied those families. Their teens were more stressed, as we would expect, but most of them were doing just fine, absolutely fine. And so I think the point here really is, families do the best they can with the options they've got, but mostly what we want to do is reassure parents that you just being around is enough. I think often we feel like we've got to interact, we've got to have a conversation, and that's not necessarily what the data show.
I've always been curious about this question. What is it about the teenage years that cause kids to sort of want to rebel against their parents?
Yeah.
No, it's like,
adolescent rebellion, that terrible side effect of puberty.
Yeah. Why do they
There's two things. One is it's their job to become independent, right? So I think in normal development, it's the teen's job to push away and it's the parent's job to pull back. The other reason, honestly, is that they get wise to us. I think at 14, the scales fall away.
And bored.
Yeah, and they realize, you guys are just older. You don't necessarily know all the time what to do. So
it also seems to me it's a bit of a pull of being with your friends. All of a sudden, they're developing friends and contacts, and they want to be where they are doing their thing.
Absolutely, and that's their job. And what we want to do in that context is for home to be a secure base. That they can explore the world and move away and come back and know that parents are available if needed. And I think one of the challenges with teenagers is needs arise quickly. For anyone who spends time with teenagers knows they're fine one minute and then completely not fine the next. So I think for teenagers, they feel like, let's pretend you're not there, but don't go anywhere, I might need you.
What would be a real-world example of being a potted plant parent?
Sure, so I collected these from my friends as I was writing them. So one of my friends just folds laundry every night in the room where her teenagers watch TV. She's got a lot of athletes in the house, so there's always laundry to do. So she's around, but there's no pressure, there's no expectation.
Interesting.
And another one of my friends, his daughter will ask him to sit in the room where she does her homework, and he just does his work there quietly. And I think that we can just underestimate the value of just being available without an agenda. So many adults, when they're with teenagers, they're bringing an agenda. It's a coach or a teacher or a parent,
I wonder if the inverse is true. We played that clip from Amy Poehler and Mean Girls. Does being overly involved, does that have a deleterious effect on relationships?
That's a good question. Not necessarily. Parent connection, involvement with the parents is a good thing. But I think what I want to reassure parents is that just because you're not having a deep conversation, just because your teenager's not coming to you with questions, doesn't mean that you just being there in the kitchen doing your thing, available if they need you, that is still valuable.
So could I move into your office? Because if you're there, I would just have more fun. Just be there on the couch.
You want me to just be around you more?
Just be around. That's all.
I can do that.
I could get more done.
I think so.
It's beautiful. You guys are onto something.
I'll be your potted plant. I don't think you want me as a potted plant, though. You want more than that.
Beautiful potted plant. Lisa Damour, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.